Maya Chen sat at the back corner of the Galactic Military Academy classroom, her dark eyes focused on the holographic display showing battle formations. While other cadets whispered and joked during breaks, she remained silent, taking notes in her small handwriting. Her fellow students barely noticed her presence, which was exactly how she preferred it. The academy buzzed with excitement about the upcoming war games. Representatives from 12 different species attended the prestigious institution, each bringing their own military traditions and combat styles. The Krillian students boasted about their natural armor plating and electromagnetic pulse abilities. The Vexari cadets demonstrated their telepathic coordination skills during group exercises. The Thorani, with their forearms and enhanced reflexes, dominated the physical combat simulations. Then there were the humans. Most people considered them the underdogs of the galaxy. They had no natural armor, no telepathic abilities, no extra limbs or enhanced senses. What they did have was stubbornness and an unusual capacity for violence when cornered, though the other species saw this as primitive rather than advantageous. Maya represented everything that made humans seem unremarkable. She stood barely 5 feet tall, with a slight build that made her look fragile next to her alien classmates. Her voice was soft when she spoke, which happened rarely. During combat drills, she performed adequately, but never stood out. Her test scores were solid, but not exceptional. To everyone around her, she was just another quiet human trying to prove herself in a galaxy that had already moved beyond her species. Commander Thex, a massive Thorani with battle scars covering his forearms, announced the final exercise. Cadets, you will be divided into mixed species teams for a combat simulation. The scenario involves rescuing hostages from a fortified position while under heavy fire. Each team will have 2 hours to complete the mission. Failure means elimination from the advanced program. Maya's heart raced, but her expression remained calm. She had trained for this moment her entire life, though none of her classmates knew it. They saw a bookish girl who preferred studying to socializing. They didn't know about the hours she spent in the abandoned training facilities after classes ended. They had no idea about her family's military background or the brutal conditioning she had endured since childhood. The team assignments appeared on the main screen. Maya found herself grouped with Orcs, an arrogant Krillian who immediately took charge, Zephyra, a telepathic Vexari who communicated mainly with her own species, and Bronx, a Thorani warrior who seemed more interested in showing off his strength than developing strategy. "Great," Korax muttered, his scales shimmering with annoyance. "We get stuck with the quiet human. This should be interesting." Zephyra's large eyes focused on Maya for a moment before she turned away dismissively. The Vexari had probably tried to read her thoughts and found them surprisingly well protected. Most humans had no mental defenses against telepathy, but Maya was not most humans. During the planning session, Korax outlined his strategy with typical Krillian directness. "We go in fast and hard. I'll use my electromagnetic abilities to disable their defenses. Bronx can handle the heavy combat. Zephyra will coordinate our movements telepathically. The human can stay back and provide support." Maya listened without comment, noting the flaws in his plan. The fortress layout favored defenders with narrow corridors and multiple choke points. A frontal assault would result in heavy casualties and likely mission failure. But she said nothing, knowing her teammates wouldn't listen to suggestions from someone they considered the weakest link. The simulation began at dawn. The fortress rose from a rocky plateau, its walls bristling with automated defenses and enemy soldiers. Intelligence reports indicated 30 hostages held in the central chamber, guarded by 50 enemy combatants equipped with advanced weapons and energy shields. Korax charged forward as planned, his electromagnetic pulses crackling through the air. Several defense turrets shut down, but backup systems quickly came online. Bronx followed, his forearms wielding massive weapons as he engaged the enemy soldiers. Zephyra coordinated their movements from a concealed position, her telepathic commands keeping them synchronized. For the first 30 minutes, the plan worked reasonably well. They fought their way through the outer defenses and reached the fortress walls. But then everything went wrong. Enemy reinforcements arrived from an unexpected direction, catching them in a crossfire. Korax's electromagnetic abilities proved less effective against the newer defensive systems. Bronx, despite his impressive strength, found himself outnumbered and outgunned. Zephyra struggled to maintain telepathic contact while under heavy fire. Maya watched from her support position as her teammates fell back in disorder. The enemy had anticipated their strategy perfectly, setting traps and ambushes that exploited every weakness in Korax's frontal assault plan. Within minutes, they were pinned down behind inadequate cover, taking casualties and running low on ammunition. "We need to retreat," Korax announced through gritted teeth, his pride clearly wounded. "This fortress is too well defended. The mission is impossible." But Maya was no longer listening to her team leader. She was studying the fortress with different eyes, noting details that others had missed. The enemy's confidence in their defenses had made them predictable. They expected another frontal assault, another display of alien superiority over human determination. They had no idea what was coming. Maya began moving, not toward the retreat route her teammates expected, but toward a seemingly impossible approach to the fortress. Her movements were fluid and precise, covering ground with an efficiency that would have surprised anyone watching closely. But her teammates were too focused on their own problems to notice the quiet human girl disappearing into the rocky terrain. She had spent years preparing for this moment, training in techniques that had been passed down through generations of human warriors. While other species relied on their natural advantages, humans had learned to use their minds, their adaptability, and their absolute refusal to accept defeat. The real battle was about to begin, and Maya Chen was ready to show the galaxy exactly what humans could do when they stopped trying to fight like everyone else and started fighting like themselves. Maya moved through the rocky terrain like a shadow, her small size allowing her to slip between boulders that would have blocked larger aliens. Every step was calculated, every movement designed to avoid detection by the fortress sensors. While her teammates continued their noisy retreat, drawing enemy attention, she approached from an angle no one expected. The fortress designers had made a critical error. They had built their defenses assuming attackers would follow standard military doctrine taught throughout the galaxy. Overwhelming firepower, coordinated telepathic assault, technological superiority. They had not considered the possibility of a single human using techniques that predated space travel. Maya reached the base of the fortress wall and paused, studying the stone construction. The aliens had built strong walls, but they had built them to withstand energy weapons and explosive charges. They had not considered someone who might climb them using nothing but determination and skill. She pulled climbing gear from her pack, equipment she had modified herself in the academy workshops. Other students had laughed at her strange hobby of rock climbing, calling it primitive and pointless in an age of anti-gravity technology. They never understood that some problems required old solutions. The climb began in the pre-dawn darkness. Maya's fingers found holds in the stone that sensors could not detect. Her breathing remained controlled and silent. Years of training had taught her to ignore pain, fatigue, and fear. She moved upward with mechanical precision, each movement bringing her closer to the enemy who had no idea she existed. Halfway up the wall, an energy blast illuminated the night as her teammates made another failed assault attempt. Maya used the distraction to cover more ground, knowing the enemy would be focused on the obvious threat rather than watching for shadows on their walls. She reached a narrow window 60 feet above the ground. Intelligence had identified it as a ventilation shaft for the fortress environmental systems. Too small for most species to use, it had been dismissed as a possible entry point. But Maya was not most species. The shaft was cramped and uncomfortable, forcing her to crawl on her belly through darkness. Dust and debris scratched at her skin, but she ignored the discomfort. She had endured worse during her training. Her father had made sure of that. General Marcus Chen had been one of humanity's greatest military minds before his death in a border skirmish. He had understood that humans would always be outnumbered and outgunned in galactic conflicts. Their only advantage lay in their willingness to do things other species considered impossible or insane. Maya emerged from the ventilation shaft into a storage room filled with supplies. She checked her equipment and reviewed the fortress layout one more time. The hostages were held 3 levels down in a heavily guarded chamber. Between her and them stood 50 enemy soldiers, automated defenses, and enough firepower to level a city block. Any sane person would have retreated. Maya smiled for the first time since the mission began. She moved through the fortress corridors using routes that existed in the blueprints, but had been forgotten by the defenders. Service tunnels, maintenance shafts, emergency passages designed for evacuation rather than infiltration. The enemy had sensors watching the main corridors, but had neglected these secondary routes. Maya reached the armory without encountering a single guard. The enemy's confidence in their perimeter defenses had made them careless about internal security. They never imagined someone could bypass their walls entirely. The armory contained weapons designed for multiple species. Maya selected items that suited her particular skills rather than trying to use alien technology she didn't understand. Explosives, smoke grenades, flashbangs, and a simple projectile weapon that fired metal slugs rather than energy beams. Old technology that modern sensors might not immediately recognize as threats. She also found something unexpected, a maintenance uniform that would allow her to move openly through certain sections of the fortress. The enemy had hired local workers to handle basic upkeep, and their security systems were programmed to ignore uniformed maintenance personnel in non-critical areas. Wearing the stolen uniform, Maya walked openly through corridors that she could never have infiltrated as a military cadet. Guards nodded at her casually, assuming she belonged there. The disguise was so simple that it was brilliant, relying on the enemy's own assumptions about who posed a threat. She reached the detention level and paused to study the guard rotations. 12 soldiers protected the hostage chamber, working in shifts of 4. They were professional and alert, but they were watching for external threats, not for a maintenance worker who had been moving freely through their fortress for the past hour. Maya placed her first explosive charge in a junction box that controlled lighting for the entire level. The charge was small and precisely placed, designed to create confusion rather than destruction. When it detonated, the corridor would be plunged into darkness without triggering the fortress-wide alarm systems. She positioned herself in an alcove near the guard station and activated the timer. 30 seconds until the lights went out. She controlled her breathing and reviewed her plan one final time. She would have perhaps 2 minutes of confusion before the guards adapted to the situation. The explosion was smaller than a firecracker, but it had the desired effect. The lights went out, emergency systems activated, and the guards immediately began following their protocols for power failures. They were trained and disciplined, but their training had not prepared them for what happened next. Maya moved in the darkness like she had been born to it. The guards had superior night vision technology, but Maya had something better. Knowledge of exactly where they would be and what they would do in this situation. The first guard went down silently, taken out by a chokehold that cut off blood flow to his brain. The second never saw the attack coming. The third managed to raise an alarm, but by then Maya was already moving toward the hostage chamber. The remaining guards converged on her position, but Maya was no longer there. She had used their own response protocols against them, predicting their movements and staying one step ahead. What looked like random chaos to them was actually a carefully choreographed dance that she had been practicing her entire life. The hostage chamber door was sealed with an electronic lock that would have taken her teammates hours to breach. Maya bypassed it in 30 seconds using techniques her father had taught her, methods that relied on understanding the psychology of the engineers who built the systems rather than trying to overpower them with technology. Inside the chamber, 30 frightened civilians looked up at her in amazement. They had expected rescue to come in the form of heavily armed soldiers and massive explosions. Instead, their savior was a quiet girl who looked like she should be studying in a library rather than conducting military operations. "Stay calm and follow me," Maya whispered. "We're leaving now." The hostages stared at Maya in disbelief. Among them were representatives from several alien species, all of whom had expected their rescue to involve overwhelming firepower and coordinated military assault. Instead, they found themselves facing a small human girl who had somehow penetrated the most secure fortress in the simulation. "Who are you?" whispered Dr. Kellex, a prominent Vexari scientist whose capture had been the primary mission objective. "Where are the other soldiers?" Maya checked her watch. She had been inside the fortress for 47 minutes. Her teammates were probably still regrouping from their failed assault. Assuming the mission was impossible, the simulation controllers would be monitoring everything, noting how each cadet responded to overwhelming odds. "I'm Cadet Chen," she replied quietly, helping an injured Thorani to his feet. "We need to move now. The guards will realize what happened soon." She led the group toward the maintenance tunnels she had scouted earlier. The passages were narrow and uncomfortable for the larger aliens, but they provided the only route out of the fortress that avoided the main security checkpoints. "This is impossible," muttered Captain Corvus, a Krillian military officer whose electromagnetic implants had been disabled by his captors. No single soldier could penetrate these defenses. This must be some kind of trick. Maya ignored his complaints and focused on moving the group efficiently through the maze of service corridors. Each hostage had different physical capabilities and limitations. The Vexari moved quickly but tired easily. The Thorani were strong but struggled in the confined spaces. The humans adapted well but needed encouragement to keep moving despite their fear. Behind them, alarm klaxons finally began to sound. The guards had discovered their missing colleagues and the empty hostage chamber. Within minutes, the entire fortress would be in lockdown mode, with search teams covering every possible escape route, every possible route except the one Maya had chosen. She led the group up through a vertical maintenance shaft that connected to the fortress water treatment facility. The space was cramped and required climbing skills that most of the hostages lacked. Maya found herself lifting and supporting aliens twice her size, her enhanced human endurance allowing her to maintain the pace despite the physical strain. "How did you know about these passages?" Dr. Kellax asked as they climbed. Her Vexari telepathic abilities were slowly returning as the dampening effects of her captivity wore off, and she was beginning to sense something unusual about the quiet human leading their escape. "I studied the blueprints," Maya replied simply. "Most people look at them to see what's there. I looked to see what was missing." They reached the water treatment level just as search teams entered the detention area below. Maya could hear boots thundering through corridors, voices shouting orders, energy weapons charging for combat. The fortress was now fully alert, but the guards were searching in all the wrong places. The water treatment facility provided access to the fortress exterior through drainage pipes that carried wastewater down the mountainside. The pipes were large enough for a person to crawl through, though the experience would be unpleasant for anyone who attempted it. "You cannot be serious," Captain Corvus said when Maya explained the escape route. "We are military officers and respected civilians. We cannot crawl through sewage pipes like vermin." Maya looked at him with calm, dark eyes. "You can crawl through the pipes, or you can explain to the enemy guards why you're standing here when they arrive in approximately 3 minutes. Your choice." The Krillian's electromagnetic sensors were detecting the approaching search teams, confirming Maya's assessment. He swallowed his pride and followed her into the drainage system. The journey through the pipes was exactly as unpleasant as everyone expected. The larger aliens struggled with the confined space, and several of them suffered claustrophobia attacks that Maya had to talk them through. But she had chosen this route for a reason. The enemy would never imagine that anyone would voluntarily subject themselves to such conditions when other escape routes existed. They emerged from the drainage system at the base of the mountain, covered in filth but alive and free. Maya immediately led them to a concealed position among the rocks where they could observe the fortress while remaining hidden from its sensors. The fortress was now fully illuminated, searchlights sweeping the mountainside as guards spread out in organized search patterns. Emergency vehicles filled the air, scanning for heat signatures and energy weapons. The entire defensive force had been mobilized to find the escaped hostages. "Incredible," Dr. Kellax breathed, her telepathic senses finally detecting the full scope of Maya's mental discipline. "Your mind is like a fortress itself. How did you learn such advanced meditation techniques?" Maya was about to answer when explosions erupted from the fortress main gate. Her teammates had launched another assault, this time with better coordination. Energy blasts lit up the night as Korax, Bronx, and Zafira made their desperate attempt to rescue the hostages they believed were still inside. "We have to help them," Captain Corvus said, his military instincts overriding his earlier complaints about Maya's methods. "They're fighting impossible odds." Maya shook her head. "They're doing exactly what they need to do. The enemy thinks the real rescue attempt is happening now. They'll focus all their attention on the obvious threat while we slip away unnoticed." She was right. Every guard in the fortress was now engaged in repelling the frontal assault. The search teams had been recalled to defend against what appeared to be a coordinated military operation. No one was looking for a small group of refugees moving quietly through the rocks. Maya led the hostages in a wide circle around the fortress, using terrain features to mask their movement from orbital sensors. Her knowledge of the simulation environment was comprehensive, extending far beyond the fortress itself to include escape routes and safe zones that most cadets never bothered to study. They reached the designated extraction point just as the first sun began to rise. The simulation zone boundary was marked by a simple sign, but crossing it would officially complete the mission and end the exercise. Wait, Dr. Kellogg said as they approached the boundary. Your teammates are still fighting. Shouldn't we signal them that the mission is complete? Maya paused at the boundary line, looking back toward the fortress where energy weapons still flashed in the growing dawn light. Her teammates had no idea that the mission was already accomplished. They were fighting a battle they had already won, sacrificing themselves for hostages who were already safe. The simulation will end when we cross this line, she explained. The computer will inform them that the mission was successful. They'll understand what happened. Captain Corvus studied Maya with new respect. You planned this entire operation, didn't you? The failed assault, the distraction, everything was designed to give you the opportunity to succeed where conventional tactics would fail. Maya didn't answer directly. Instead, she stepped across the boundary line, officially completing the mission that everyone had considered impossible. The simulation environment immediately began shutting down, the fortress and mountains fading as the holographic projectors powered down. But the real test was just beginning. Maya had proven that humans could succeed where other species failed, but she had done it in a way that challenged every assumption about proper military conduct. The academy instructors would have to decide whether her methods represented innovation or insubordination. Either way, the quiet girl in the back of the classroom had just changed everything. The simulation chamber fell silent as the holographic environment dissolved around them. Maya stood calmly beside the rescued hostages while her teammates materialized nearby, their armor scorched and smoking from their desperate assault on the fortress. The contrast was striking. 3 aliens bearing the marks of intense combat, and 1 small human who looked like she had been taking a quiet walk. Korak stared at Maya in complete confusion, his Kryllian scales still crackling with residual electromagnetic energy. How did you? Where did they come from? We were still fighting to reach the detention center. Before Maya could answer, Commander Thex entered the simulation chamber, his 4 Thorani arms moving with barely controlled agitation. Behind him came the other Academy instructors, representing each of the major galactic species. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to outright disbelief. Cadet Chen, Commander Thex began, his voice carrying the authority of decades of military experience. Please explain how you managed to extract 30 hostages from a fortress that 3 of your teammates couldn't even penetrate. Maya stood at attention, her posture perfect despite the filth still covering her uniform from the drainage pipes. Sir, I identified weaknesses in the fortress design and exploited them using unconventional tactics. Professor Vexhai, the Vexari telepathy instructor, stepped forward with her large eyes focused intently on Maya. I'm detecting unprecedented mental discipline from this cadet. Her thoughts are completely shielded even now. How is this possible for a human? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Maya had spent her entire academy career hiding her true capabilities, allowing others to underestimate her while she observed and learned. Now that strategy was no longer possible. My father taught me meditation techniques, Maya replied simply. He believed that mental discipline was more important than physical strength. Dr. Kellax, still covered in drainage tunnel residue but speaking with scientific authority, interjected from her position among the rescued hostages. Instructors, I must report that this cadet's performance was extraordinary. She demonstrated tactical knowledge, physical capabilities, and psychological warfare skills that exceeded anything I've observed in my 40 years of military consulting. Commander Thex activated the simulation playback system, displaying holographic recordings of the entire exercise. The instructors watched in silence as Maya's infiltration played out in accelerated time. Her climb up the fortress wall, her movement through the ventilation system, her use of disguise and misdirection, her precise timing of explosives, and her systematic neutralization of guards. Impossible, muttered Instructor Grok, a heavily armored Thorani who taught combat tactics. No cadet should possess these skills. Where did you learn advanced infiltration techniques? Maya hesitated for the first time since the exercise began. The truth was complicated, involving family traditions and training methods that she had never discussed with anyone at the academy. Her father's death had left her with knowledge that few humans possessed and that no alien truly understood. Sir, my family has a military background that extends back several generations. My training began when I was very young. The instructors exchanged glances that conveyed volumes of unspoken communication. Each species had their own military traditions, but humans were relative newcomers to galactic warfare. The idea that they might have developed unique tactical doctrines was both intriguing and concerning. Commander Thex manipulated the playback controls, focusing on Maya's infiltration route. This approach required detailed knowledge of fortress construction principles that aren't taught in basic academy courses. You also demonstrated climbing skills that exceeded our physical fitness requirements. I study architectural databases in my free time, Maya replied, and I practice rock climbing as a hobby. Professor Zexkol, the Krillian electromagnetic warfare specialist, was studying her with growing interest. Your teammate's assault provided the perfect distraction for your infiltration. Did you coordinate this strategy with them beforehand? Maya glanced at Korax, Bronx, and Zephyra, who were still staring at her in amazement. No, sir. I predicted their likely response to the fortress defenses and planned accordingly. The simple statement sent ripples of shock through the group of instructors. Maya had essentially admitted to manipulating her teammates without their knowledge, using their predictable behavior as part of her own tactical plan. You used your own team as unwitting accomplices, Commander Thex observed. That demonstrates either brilliant strategic thinking or dangerous disregard for military protocol. Bronx, the Thorani warrior who had led the frontal assault, stepped forward with his forearms crossed in a gesture of respect. Commander, I must speak in defense of Cadet Chen. While we were failing to make any progress against the fortress defenses, she was successfully completing the mission. Her methods may be unconventional, but her results speak for themselves. Zephyra, the telepathic Vexari, nodded in agreement. I tried to read her thoughts during our planning session, but found only surface thoughts about supporting our assault. I never detected any deception or hidden planning. Her mental defenses are remarkable. The admission from Zephyra caused another stir among the instructors. Telepathic species generally considered humans to be mentally transparent, lacking the sophisticated thought patterns necessary to resist casual mind reading. Maya's ability to hide her true intentions from a trained Vexari telepath suggested capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about human psychology. Dr. Kellax spoke again, her scientific training evident in her precise language. Instructors, I believe you're looking at this from the wrong perspective. You're trying to understand how a human cadet acquired these skills. But perhaps the question should be, what other capabilities do humans possess that we haven't recognized? The comment created an uncomfortable silence. The galactic military establishment was built on the assumption that each species contributed their unique strengths to combined operations. Humans were generally assigned support roles that took advantage of their adaptability and determination while acknowledging their lack of specialized abilities. Maya's performance suggested that humans might have specialized abilities that were simply different from what other species expected. Commander Thex made a decision that would change the course of Maya's academy career. Cadet Chen, you will report to advanced tactical studies tomorrow morning. Your performance today has earned you a place in the accelerated program reserved for cadets with exceptional potential. Maya felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. The advanced program would expose her to higher levels of scrutiny and more challenging scenarios. She would no longer be able to hide in the back of the classroom, invisible among more obvious talents. Sir, I'm honored by the opportunity, she replied formally. As the instructors dismissed the cadets, Professor Vexhai approached Maya privately. Cadet, I've never encountered a human mind like yours. Would you be willing to participate in some research studies? We're trying to better understand the range of human psychological capabilities. Maya nodded politely, while keeping her thoughts carefully shielded. She understood that her academy career was about to become much more complicated. The quiet anonymity that had protected her was gone forever. But perhaps it was time for the galaxy to learn what humans could really do. 3 months after the fortress simulation, Maya found herself in the Advanced Tactical Studies program surrounded by the Academy's most promising cadets. The classroom dynamics had changed dramatically. Instead of being ignored in the back corner, she now found herself the subject of intense curiosity and sometimes uncomfortable attention. The advanced program included cadets from across the galaxy, each selected for exceptional abilities in their species' traditional strengths. There was Zartoth, a Krillian whose electromagnetic manipulation could disable entire starship systems. Filnara, a Vexari telepath capable of coordinating battalion-level operations through pure thought. Gorthak, a Thorani whose four-armed combat skills had earned him victories against opponents twice his size. And Maya, the human who had accomplished the impossible using methods that no one quite understood. Professor Sektar, an ancient Vexari with decades of tactical experience, stood before the advanced class presenting their next challenge. Today we begin preparation for the Galactic War College entrance examination. This simulation will be observed by military leaders from all major species. Your performance will determine not only your acceptance to the War College, but your future assignments in the Galactic Fleet. The scenario appeared on the classroom's holographic display. A heavily defended enemy stronghold occupied a strategic asteroid, controlling shipping routes through 3 star systems. Intelligence indicated that the enemy possessed advanced shields, automated defense platforms, and a garrison of elite troops from multiple species. Your objective is simple, Professor Sektar continued. Capture the stronghold with minimal casualties while preserving the orbital infrastructure. You have access to a full battle group including capital ships, fighter squadrons, and marine assault teams. Maya studied the tactical display while her classmates began discussing conventional assault strategies. The enemy position was formidable, designed to withstand exactly the kind of frontal attack that galactic military doctrine favored. Multiple overlapping shield generators, redundant command structures, and carefully positioned weapon emplacements created a defensive network that would cost thousands of lives to breach. Zartoth was already outlining an electromagnetic warfare approach, describing how his abilities could temporarily disable the shield generators. Velnara suggested coordinating simultaneous telepathic assaults to confuse the enemy command structure. Gorthek advocated for a massive marine assault using his species' superior close combat abilities. All of their plans followed established military doctrine. Identify the enemy's strength, counter it with your own specialized abilities, and achieve victory through superior force or technology. It was exactly the kind of thinking that had made the Fortress simulation impossible for Maya's previous teammates. Cadet Chen, Professor Sektar called out, interrupting Maya's analysis. You've been unusually quiet. What are your thoughts on this scenario? Maya felt the attention of the entire class focus on her. Since joining the advanced program, she had participated in several simulations, each time achieving success through unconventional methods that surprised her instructors and fellow cadets. Her reputation as the human who thought differently was becoming both an asset and a burden. Professor, I'm still analyzing the scenario, she replied carefully. The enemy position is well designed to counter traditional assault tactics. Indeed it is, the professor agreed. That's why it will serve as an excellent test of advanced tactical thinking. Perhaps you could share your initial observations? Maya activated her personal tactical display, highlighting details that others had overlooked. The stronghold was constructed using standard galactic engineering principles. The designers assumed attackers would follow conventional doctrine, so they optimized their defenses against known tactical approaches. Velnara, the Vexari telepath, leaned forward with interest. Are you suggesting that conventional tactics are inadequate for this scenario? I'm suggesting that conventional tactics are predictable, Maya replied. The enemy knows how each of our species prefers to fight. They've prepared specifically for electromagnetic warfare, telepathic assault, and overwhelming force. They expect us to use our strengths against their prepared defenses. Zartoth's scales flickered with annoyance. Human. Are you implying that our traditional methods are somehow inferior to your unusual approaches? The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. Since Maya's performance in the Fortress simulation, some of the alien cadets had begun to resent the attention she received. They viewed her success as a fluke rather than evidence of genuine capability. I'm not criticizing traditional methods, Maya replied diplomatically. I'm pointing out that this scenario was specifically designed to test our ability to think beyond them. Professor Sektar observed the exchange with calculating eyes. An interesting perspective, Cadet Chen. Would you care to elaborate on what thinking beyond traditional methods might involve? Maya hesitated, knowing that her answer could alienate her classmates even further. But the professor's question demanded honesty, and Maya had learned that half-truths were more dangerous than uncomfortable facts. Human military history includes extensive study of asymmetric warfare, she began. When facing a superior enemy, the key is to avoid fighting on their terms. Instead of attacking their strengths, you make their strengths irrelevant. The classroom fell silent as the implications of Maya's statement became clear. She wasn't just suggesting alternative tactics. She was challenging the fundamental assumptions that guided galactic military thinking. Gorthak, the Thorani warrior, spoke with barely controlled aggression. "You're describing cowardice, human. True warriors face their enemies directly, strength against strength." Maya met his gaze steadily. "I'm describing victory regardless of the odds. Sometimes the bravest thing a warrior can do is find a way to win without unnecessary sacrifice." "Enough," Professor Sektar interrupted, before the discussion could escalate further. "These philosophical differences highlight exactly why this simulation will be valuable. Each of you will have the opportunity to demonstrate your tactical approach." The professor activated the simulation scheduling system. "You will each command the battle group for a 2-hour period. The simulation will reset between attempts, allowing everyone to face identical initial conditions. Your performance will be evaluated based on mission success, casualty minimization, and innovation." Maya felt her stomach tighten as she saw her name listed last in the rotation. She would have to watch her classmates attempt conventional solutions before presenting her own approach. By then, the professors and observers would have clear expectations about what constituted proper tactical thinking. Over the following days, Maya watched each of her classmates face the stronghold scenario. Zartoth's electromagnetic assault succeeded in disabling the outer defenses, but resulted in heavy casualties when the enemy adapted their tactics. Velnara's telepathic coordination allowed for better fleet management, but couldn't overcome the stronghold's fundamental defensive advantages. Gorthak's marine assault was spectacular but costly, achieving partial success at the price of thousands of simulated lives. Each attempt followed the same pattern: initial success using species-specific advantages, followed by adaptation from a well-prepared enemy, ultimately resulting in either failure or Pyrrhic victory. When Maya's turn finally arrived, she found herself facing not only the simulation, but also the accumulated expectations of her instructors and the resentment of classmates who believed their superior approaches had been unfairly dismissed. Commander Thex himself had arrived to observe, along with senior officers from the Galactic Fleet Command. Maya's reputation had spread beyond the Academy, and her performance in this simulation would determine whether she was viewed as a promising cadet or a dangerous anomaly. Maya took her position at the tactical command station and began her analysis of the enemy stronghold. But instead of focusing on how to attack it, she found herself asking a different question entirely. What if the stronghold didn't need to be attacked at all? Maya stared at the tactical display showing the heavily fortified asteroid stronghold, but her mind was working on problems that the simulation designers had never intended her to consider. While her classmates had focused on how to breach the defenses, Maya was questioning why the defenses existed in the first place. "Begin simulation," announced Professor Sektar. "Cadet Chen, you have command of Battle Group 7. Your orders are to capture the enemy stronghold with minimal casualties." Maya acknowledged the orders but didn't immediately begin moving her fleet toward the asteroid. Instead, she spent precious minutes analyzing data that had nothing to do with military capabilities. Supply routes, communication patterns, civilian traffic in the surrounding systems, economic data about mining operations and trade agreements. "Cadet Chen," Commander Thex's voice carried a note of impatience, "your classmates have all engaged the enemy within the first 10 minutes. Are you experiencing difficulty with the tactical systems?" Maya continued her analysis, her fingers dancing across control panels that most cadets ignored. "Sir, I'm gathering intelligence about the operational environment. Military action should be based on comprehensive understanding of the strategic situation." In the observation area, she could hear muttered comments from watching officers. They had come to see the human cadet who thought differently. But so far she was just sitting still while enemy forces strengthened their positions. Velnara, the Vixari telepath, leaned forward with curiosity. What could possibly be more important than engaging the enemy? Every moment we delay gives them more time to prepare. Maya finally looked up from her analysis, her dark eyes bright with an idea that none of them would have expected. "The enemy isn't preparing. They're waiting. This stronghold isn't just a military position. It's a critical link in civilian shipping routes that supply 12 different star systems with essential resources." She activated the main display, showing shipping patterns and supply chains that extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. If we destroy or capture this stronghold using conventional assault methods, we disrupt trade routes that support billions of civilians. The economic damage would be catastrophic. Professor Sektar frowned at the display. Cadet, your mission parameters are clearly defined. You're to capture the stronghold, not conduct an economic impact study. With respect, sir, Maya replied. My mission is to capture the stronghold with minimal casualties. I believe that includes civilian casualties caused by indirect economic warfare. The observation area erupted in surprised murmurs. Maya had just redefined the scope of the simulation in a way that forced everyone to reconsider what constituted acceptable military action. Zartoth's scales flickered with annoyance. Human, you're overthinking a simple tactical problem. The enemy holds a strategic position. We take it from them. That's how warfare works. Maya turned to face her Krillian classmate. That's how warfare worked when conflicts were isolated to single planets or systems. But galactic civilization is interconnected. Military actions have economic and social consequences that extend far beyond the immediate battlefield. She turned back to her tactical station and began issuing orders that confused everyone watching. Instead of moving her battle group toward the asteroid, she dispatched small scout ships to investigate civilian shipping in the area. She contacted trade representatives from multiple species, gathering information about supply contracts and delivery schedules. This is ridiculous, Gorthak muttered from the observation area. She's conducting a business meeting instead of a military operation. But Maya's unconventional approach was revealing information that changed everything about the tactical situation. The enemy stronghold wasn't just a military position. It was also a critical way station that processed shipping manifests, provided navigation services, and maintained supply caches for civilian vessels. More importantly, the enemy forces occupying the stronghold were apparently trying to minimize disruption to civilian operations. They were intercepting military vessels while allowing commercial traffic to pass through with only minor delays. Interesting, Commander Thex observed. The enemy is showing remarkable restraint for an occupying force. They could have shut down all civilian traffic to strengthen their strategic position. Maya nodded as she continued gathering intelligence. Sir, I believe the enemy's primary objective isn't military conquest. They're trying to demonstrate that they can provide better services than the current government. This is political warfare disguised as military action. The revelation sent shockwaves through the observation area. If Maya was correct, then conventional military assault would actually serve the enemy's purposes by proving that galactic military forces were willing to sacrifice civilian welfare for tactical advantage. So what do you propose? Professor Sektar asked. If we can't attack without playing into their strategy, how do we complete the mission? Maya smiled for the first time since entering the simulation. We give them exactly what they want, sir. Better service. She began implementing a plan that was unlike anything the Academy had ever seen. Instead of attacking the stronghold, Maya used her battle group to establish an alternative way station on a nearby asteroid. Her engineering teams worked frantically to set up communication relays, navigation beacons, and supply distribution centers. Within hours, Maya's makeshift facility was offering the same services as the enemy stronghold, but with better efficiency and lower costs. She used her fleet's advanced technology to provide faster processing times, more accurate navigation data, and more comprehensive supply options. The effect on civilian shipping was immediate. Commercial vessels began choosing Maya's facility over the enemy stronghold, drawn by superior service and reduced delays. The enemy found themselves losing their civilian shield as traffic patterns shifted away from their position. Brilliant, breathed Dr. Kellax, who had been observing from the Academy's research section. She's using economic warfare to isolate the enemy without firing a single shot. But the enemy forces weren't passive observers. When they realized that their civilian cover was disappearing, they began making increasingly desperate attempts to disrupt Maya's alternative facility. They launched probe attacks, sent infiltration teams, and even tried jamming communication systems. Each enemy action violated the protection of civilian shipping that had been their primary political advantage. Maya documented every incident, broadcasting evidence of enemy aggression to civilian authorities throughout the galaxy. The enemy is being forced to choose between military effectiveness and political legitimacy, Maya explained to the fascinated observers. Every attack they make against our facility proves that they're willing to threaten civilian infrastructure to maintain their position. The final phase of Maya's plan was the most audacious yet. She opened direct communication channels with the enemy commander, offering to provide technical assistance in upgrading their own facilities to match the service levels of her alternative way station. You want to surrender to them? Zartoth asked in disbelief. Maya shook her head. I want to make their occupation irrelevant. If they accept our technical assistance, they become dependent on our technology and expertise. If they refuse, they admit that they can't provide adequate services to civilian shipping. The enemy commander, faced with an impossible choice, ultimately chose to accept Maya's offer rather than lose all legitimacy with the civilian population. Within days, joint technical teams were working together to upgrade both facilities, and the distinction between enemy stronghold and Galactic way station became meaningless. Maya had captured the stronghold without firing a shot, without losing a single life, and without disrupting civilian operations. She had also established a precedent for resolving similar conflicts through economic and technological superiority rather than military force. The simulation ended with enemy forces essentially integrated into galactic infrastructure, their political objectives achieved through cooperation rather than conquest. Commander Thex stood in stunned silence for several minutes before speaking. Cadet Chen, you have just revolutionized our understanding of modern warfare. This simulation was designed to test tactical thinking, but you've demonstrated strategic thinking that operates on an entirely different level. Maya stood at attention, unsure whether she had succeeded brilliantly or failed completely. Sir, I apologize if my approach exceeded the simulation parameters. Exceeded them? Professor Sektar laughed. Cadet, you've made the simulation parameters obsolete. We'll need to redesign our entire curriculum to account for the possibilities you've demonstrated. But Maya's triumph came with a price. As she looked around the observation area, she saw expressions ranging from admiration to deep concern. She had proven that human thinking could solve problems that conventional galactic military doctrine couldn't handle. The question now was whether the galaxy was ready for that kind of change. 6 months later, Maya stood in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic War College, wearing the insignia of a newly commissioned Strategic Operations Officer. The ceremony was being broadcast across 12 star systems, with representatives from every major species in attendance. She was no longer the quiet girl hiding in the back of the classroom. The path to this moment had not been easy. Maya's revolutionary approach to the stronghold simulation had triggered intense debate throughout the galactic military establishment. Some officers praised her innovative thinking and demanded immediate integration of human strategic methods into standard doctrine. Others viewed her approach as dangerous precedent that could undermine traditional military authority. Fleet Admiral Orcs, the Krillian Supreme Commander, addressed the graduating class from the ceremonial platform. Today we commission officers who will face challenges that previous generations could never have imagined. The nature of warfare itself is evolving, requiring new approaches to old problems. Maya noticed the slight emphasis on new approaches, and knew the Admiral was referring to the ongoing controversy surrounding her unconventional methods. Military academies throughout the galaxy were restructuring their curricula to include courses on economic warfare, technological diplomacy, and what scholars had begun calling human-style strategic thinking. Beside her stood her former classmates from the academy. Zartoth had eventually embraced Maya's methods, learning to combine his electromagnetic abilities with psychological warfare techniques. Felnara now specialized in telepathic intelligence gathering, rather than combat coordination. Even Gorthak had adapted, using his warrior skills to protect diplomatic teams rather than lead frontal assaults. But the real changes extended far beyond individual careers. The Galactic Defense Council had established a new Strategic Innovation Division, tasked with developing unconventional solutions to military and political challenges. Maya had been offered command of the division, despite being the youngest officer ever considered for such a position. After the commissioning ceremony, Maya found herself in a private meeting with the senior military leadership of 3 different species. The room was secure against all forms of surveillance, suggesting that the conversation would involve classified material. Officer Chen, began General Vex Mira, a ancient Vexari whose telepathic abilities were legendary throughout the galaxy. We need to discuss a situation that requires your particular expertise. The holographic display activated, showing a star system on the outer rim of galactic civilization. Intelligence reports indicated the presence of an unknown species that had been systematically destroying automated probe ships and warning away all visitors. We've lost contact with 6 different exploration missions, explained Admiral Thokgar, a massive Thorani whose scars told the story of decades of combat experience. The unknown species possesses technology that exceeds our current capabilities, but they haven't expanded beyond their home system. Maya studied the tactical data, noting patterns that others had missed. They're not aggressors, are they? They're defending themselves against what they perceive as invasion. That's our assessment as well, confirmed Fleet Admiral Korix Tool. But standard first contact protocols have failed completely. They respond to diplomatic overtures with increased hostility, and they've demonstrated the ability to disable our most advanced starships. Maya began to understand why she had been called to this meeting. The unknown species represented exactly the kind of problem that conventional military doctrine couldn't solve. Force would likely result in devastating losses, while diplomatic failure could lead to a galactic-level conflict. What do you want me to do? Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. General Vex Mira leaned forward, her large eyes reflecting decades of difficult decisions. We want you to make first contact. Your methods have proven successful in situations where traditional approaches have failed. The assignment was both an honor and a potentially deadly challenge. Maya would be commanding the most advanced exploration vessel in the Galactic Fleet, with a hand-picked crew trained in her unconventional methods. But she would also be facing an unknown enemy whose technology exceeded anything the galaxy had previously encountered. I accept the assignment, Maya replied without hesitation, but I'll need complete authority to conduct the mission according to my own judgment. The senior officers exchanged glances before Admiral Thokgar nodded slowly. You'll have unprecedented autonomy, Officer Chen. The success or failure of this mission could determine the future of galactic expansion. 3 weeks later, Maya's ship approached the edge of the unknown system, her crew prepared for anything except conventional warfare. Her tactical team included specialists in economics, anthropology, engineering, and psychology, rather than traditional weapons officers. Her cargo holds contained trade goods, technological samples, and communication equipment instead of military hardware. Unknown vessels detected, reported her sensor officer, a young Vexari who had specifically requested assignment to Maya's unconventional crew. They're moving to intercept us, but their approach pattern is defensive rather than aggressive. Maya studied the sensor readings, noting details that revealed crucial information about the unknown species. Their ships were beautifully designed but showed evidence of resource constraints. Their formation patterns suggested high levels of coordination, but also indicated fear of superior numbers. They're not a conquering species, Maya announced to her crew. They're survivors. Something has made them afraid of outside contact, and they're trying to protect themselves from threats they don't understand. She opened communication channels on frequencies that would demonstrate peaceful intent rather than military capability. Instead of announcing her authority as a representative of galactic civilization, Maya introduced herself as an explorer, seeking to understand new cultures. The response was immediate and surprising. The unknown species replied not with threats or demands, but with questions. They wanted to know about galactic civilization, about the diversity of species and cultures, about trade and cooperation rather than conquest and exploitation. Over the following hours, Maya learned that the unknown species had been contacted by representatives from a hostile empire that existed beyond galactic borders. These outsiders had demanded submission and tribute, threatening extinction for any species that refused to comply. The galaxy's peaceful exploration efforts had been misinterpreted as advanced scouts for the hostile empire. The unknown species had been defending themselves against what they believed was the beginning of a military invasion. Maya's approach of leading with curiosity rather than authority had finally convinced them that galactic civilization might be different from the hostile empire they feared. Officer Chen, the unknown species leader, communicated through increasingly sophisticated translation systems. We have been alone in our fear for many years. Your people offer something we had not dared to hope for: cooperation instead of domination. The first contact mission succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. The unknown species, who called themselves the Zethkari, possessed advanced defensive technologies that could significantly strengthen galactic civilization against external threats. In exchange, they were eager to join the galactic community and contribute their knowledge to peaceful exploration and development. Maya returned to galactic space not as a military conqueror, but as the architect of an alliance that would reshape the balance of power in their region of the universe. The quiet girl who had once hidden in the back of academy classrooms had become the catalyst for a new age of galactic cooperation. Standing on the bridge of her ship as they approached the galactic capital, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had proven that humans could contribute something unique to galactic civilization: the ability to find solutions that transcended traditional thinking. But more importantly, she had demonstrated that the greatest victories often came not from imposing your will on others, but from understanding what they truly needed and finding ways to provide it. The galaxy was about to learn that humans didn't just fight differently, they thought differently about what it meant to win.